You're lying in bed right now, or maybe you will be tonight. The room is warm, maybe 21 degrees, because your heater kicked on the moment the temperature dipped, and the blanket on top of you traps every degree your body makes without you doing anything at all. You didn't choose this warmth, you just have it. Effortless, automatic, barely worth thinking about. Now rewind 40,000 years. You're lying against a limestone wall in what is now southern France, and outside the air has dropped well below freezing. There is no fire that will last till dawn without someone feeding it by hand. The wind finds every gap in the rock and pushes straight through whatever you're wrapped in. Your breath fogs in front of your face, even inside the shelter, and your fingers have already gone numb at the tips. Your body still needs to do the exact same thing it does tonight, slow itself down enough to let the brain shut off and sleep, except now that same slowdown is the thing that could kill you before morning. So the question is simple. For hundreds of thousands of years, with no heaters, no insulated walls, no down blankets, no synthetic thermal layers, how did human beings survive a single night of sleep in temperatures that could stop a body cold by dawn? The answer starts somewhere you'll never see in a fossil, buried inside your own chest, a tissue called brown fat, and it doesn't work like the fat you're picturing right now. Ordinary fat stores energy for later. Brown fat burns energy immediately, converting it straight into heat, no shivering required, no conscious effort involved. Scientists who study cold-adapted populations have found this tissue activates the moment skin temperature crosses a certain threshold, quietly raising core temperature before your conscious brain even registers that anything is wrong. Most cold climate mammals solve this with thick fur trapping warm air against the skin. Your ancestors didn't have that option anymore. They'd already shed their fur hundreds of thousands of years earlier for an entirely different reason, to survive heat, not cold. And now that same bare skin had to face freezing nights with nothing but an internal furnace to make up the difference. Evolution didn't grow the fur back. It built a heater instead, wired directly into the body, always on, always waiting for the signal. But brown fat alone never won a freezing night by itself. And here's the part almost nobody talks about. Fire wasn't primarily cooking technology. That's the story we tell, but the evidence points somewhere colder and more urgent. Fire was sleep technology first. Controlled fire use stretches back roughly 1 million years in the archaeological record, and when you look closely at cave sites across Ice Age Europe, something specific shows up again and again. Hearths aren't positioned at the center of the living space the way you'd expect if fire was mainly for cooking. They're positioned along the walls, closest to where people actually slept. The fire wasn't there to be watched while people were awake and busy. It was there to be felt while people were unconscious and helpless, which is exactly when the body loses the most heat and has the least ability to defend itself. Sleeping that close to fire, though, created its own brutal problem. A fire left unattended for more than a few hours in freezing conditions goes cold, and a group that lets it go cold on a bad enough night might not wake up at all. So sleep itself had to be broken apart on purpose. It couldn't be one long unconscious block the way you think of sleep today. Records from cold climate hunter-gatherer groups describe exactly this pattern. Individuals waking every few hours through the night specifically to feed the fire, check the coals, and return to sleep almost immediately after. This wasn't insomnia. It was infrastructure maintenance, performed half asleep, by people who probably never thought of it as a system, only as the thing you did because the alternative was freezing. Even with fire tended through the night, bodies still needed a barrier against the ground and the moving air, because radiant heat from a fire only reaches so far and does nothing for the side of your body pressed against frozen earth. Bone needles recovered from Denisova Cave in Siberia, dated to roughly 50,000 years ago, are fine enough to have sewn tailored, layered clothing, not simple draped hides thrown over the shoulders, but fitted garments engineered to trap air directly against the skin. Air, again, is a terrible conductor of heat, which sounds like a small detail until you realize it's the entire principle modern thermal layering still runs on. That trapped pocket of air worked exactly the way your base layer works right now, not by generating warmth from nothing, but by refusing to let the warmth your body already made escape into the night. And then there was the oldest heating technology anyone has ever had access to, other human bodies. In freezing climates, sleeping in tight physical contact with the group wasn't affection, or wasn't only affection. It was thermal necessity. Studies of group sleeping arrangements in cold environments show huddling meaningfully raises the temperature immediately surrounding a cluster of bodies compared to sleeping alone, cutting individual heat loss by a real margin through shared proximity alone. Your ancestors weren't just emotionally close at night. They were thermally dependent on each other, packed shoulder to shoulder like a single organism, sharing one collective pool of warmth no individual body could generate on its own. This is exactly why sleeping alone in extreme cold was rare and genuinely dangerous. But being in the group came with its own cost too. The person on the outside edge absorbed more heat loss than everyone tucked in the center, exposed to more cold, more wind. And there's strong reason to believe that outer position rotated through the night rather than staying fixed. The same basic logic modern Arctic expedition teams still use when they rotate who sleeps on the perimeter of a shared tent today. Nobody in that cave was debating fairness or running a schedule. It was simply the difference between everyone surviving until morning and someone not. As human settlements slowly grew more permanent, architecture began taking over part of what fire and huddled bodies used to handle entirely on their own, every single night, through sheer physical effort. Early cold climate dwellings were frequently built partially below ground level on purpose, using the earth itself as a stabilizing layer, since soil even a few feet down holds a far steadier temperature than open air ever does. Later structures across the Eurasian steppe in the Arctic, felt-walled tents in one region, dome-shaped ice shelters in another, were built low and rounded specifically to minimize the surface exposed directly to wind, trapping a thin shell of body-warmed air between the people inside and the hostile air outside. None of these choices were decorative. Every curve in the wall, every layer of clothing, every rotation of who slept on the outer edge that night was a calculation against heat loss, made by people who never once needed the word thermodynamics to understand exactly what it meant. Now pull back and look at the full shape of it. Your ancestors faced a nightly problem that would genuinely kill most modern people if you stripped away every heating system they rely on without a second thought. A body that requires stillness to sleep, trapped inside an environment relentlessly pulling heat out of it the entire time that body is most vulnerable and least able to fight back. And they answered it on every level available to them. They answered it with biology, carrying an internal furnace no other primate has in the same capacity, silently converting fuel into warmth without being asked. They answered it with fire, tending it in shifts through the coldest, darkest hours, breaking their own sleep on purpose so the whole group could keep breathing. They answered it with clothing, sewing air itself into fitted layers pressed against bare skin, turning trapped stillness into insulation. They answered it with community, turning their own bodies into a shared reservoir of warmth no single person could generate alone, and rotating the cost of that warmth so no one paid for it every night. And they answered it with architecture, shaping shelter around the quiet, brutal physics of never losing more warmth than they absolutely had to. Every one of those solutions is still sitting inside you right now, unused most nights, but never gone. Your body still shifts blood flow away from your extremities the instant your skin senses a real drop in temperature. You still sleep more easily under weight and warmth than you do alone in the cold, whether that's a blanket or another person beside you. You are still underneath the thermostat and the duvet and the climate control humming quietly in the wall, a fundamentally tropical primate whose ancestors solved the problem of freezing nights so completely that you were allowed to forget it was ever a problem at all. Tonight you'll pull the blanket up without giving it a single conscious thought. You won't think about the fire that had to be fed every 2 hours, or someone didn't wake up. You won't think about the bodies pressed against yours in the dark, taking turns absorbing the cold so the whole group could see morning. You won't think about the hands that sewed air into clothing 50,000 years before anyone had a word for insulation. But somewhere deep in the architecture of your own sleep, in the way your skin still tightens the instant a draft slips through a cracked window, in the way you instinctively curl toward warmth beside you, before you're even fully awake enough to know why, 40,000 years of shivering, fire-tending, huddled together ancestors are still lying awake in the cold, right beside you tonight. They never got a single warm night for free. Every one of them earned it, hour by freezing hour, so that one day someone they would never meet, someone they were building toward without even knowing it, could fall asleep without a single thought in their head. That someone is you.